Welcome everyone. We are gonna have a casual conversation, and I'm gonna start with Mr. Mohamed Jaidah. Let's talk more about the current landscape of the EV market in our region. What do you think about it? Are we ready?
Good afternoon, Tarek. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the question, because it's a very important one to start off on electrification. I think that there's been, electrification has been on the mind and in the conversations of a lot of people over the past 3-4 years in the region. And although there's a lot of talk, there are very few cars that are still on the road. Are we ready in the region? I think there are different levels of readiness, and I believe that there is a great infrastructure, especially in Qatar. I think that Qatar is a very interesting market for electrification. It's a small country. People do on average, 150, 250 kilometers per day. That's the maximum. I can't see people doing that much unless they work in Rastafan or whatnot. But otherwise, you're in a very closed circuit. And therefore, today, electric cars reach 300, 350, to a certain extent, 400 kilometers of battery, of single battery charge. Therefore, you can easily do a day or two without charging your car and just charging at night. But regardless of that, the government has, we have 100 charging stations, more than 100 charging stations all around the country. You have, obviously, Kahrama and with Tarsheed. You have Sila and Tesmo that are apps that are created to support electrification and support people who are looking at changing to electric cars. Also, obviously, more and more brands are coming in with their electric vehicles, either fully electric brands like Lucid, who's 100% electric, and then the traditional brands such as the brands that we represent, whether it's Hyundai, General Motors, or Geely, who are coming with their own electric products.
Well, you mentioned the range anxiety, of course, and we know Lucid, I believe the range is 800 kilometers, right? So are you still maybe thinking about exceeding this?
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for having me, first of all. And I think, I would like to just, expand, on the conversation that is happening. Look, range anxiety, is actually something that was really preventing the customer to jump in. And it's really an awareness issue. I think that's number one issue that prevents a customer getting into an electric vehicle. The technology advancements that has happened in the last 4 years itself, Lucid, being a California, Silicon Valley company, showing the world really that a new startup can get into this business, have the smallest size battery, giving the most horsepower, giving the fastest charging electric vehicle, and then also the range, as you said, 880 kilometers, lab tested. But even in the environment that we live in the Middle East, it will give you 600 kilometers of range, and that could last you, like you were saying, 4 or 5 days, without charging. And then you can just go home and put it. But I think DC fast charging is definitely required. And the reason why I say, outside of Bahrain, Qatar, maybe UAE, definitely in Saudi, you have cities that are 1,000 kilometers apart from each other, and you will need the DC fast charging in those countries more than Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait. But so we are working with a lot of partners. We're also working on new technology on the battery side, because I think, what it does, if you can get the range up, you can probably get into the 1,000 kilometer ranges, but really nobody needs it. It's a lot of investment into the car for no reason. So once you get over this awareness issue with the customer, when the iPhones came out, people were not used to it. Then they found out it's so convenient. You can charge them everywhere at your home. So I think we need to get to that level with the consumer, that they need to understand that they don't need 1,000 kilometers of range or 800 kilometers. So the next step would be, once that awareness is there and the data is there and the consumer is really well educated, you can actually bring the battery size down, miniaturize it, because now you have the infrastructure, now you have the awareness, and the consumer can then get the benefit of reduction in cost, because that's the number one issue we were talking before. People are also afraid that they're paying much more for an electric car. How do you reduce that cost? Number one item in the car cost is the battery. Bring the battery size down, and that's why efficiency is going to be the thing. Lucid gives you about 4.5 to 4.7 miles per kilowatt. Our next competitor, which is one of the leaders in California, who's been selling electric vehicles for a long time, they're in the 3.6, 3.5 range. So we have brought the efficiency bar up, and pretty soon we're going to keep raising that number up so that we can bring the battery size down and give that cost back to the consumer.
Amazing. Now my question is to Mr. Sujith. We know the Prius, I think, is from 1997, so Toyota had the technology a long time ago. What do you tell us, what can we expect from Toyota in the EV technology?
Assalamu and good afternoon to everyone. And thank you, Tarek, for giving me the opportunity to share the dais with Mr. Mohamed and Faisal. See, as far as Toyota goes, our philosophy is that we are not looking at carbon neutrality or reducing the carbon emission as a single problem. We are trying to look at the problem in totality. And when you are talking about electrification, or when you are talking about achieving a carbon neutrality, it is not only electric vehicles. We also need to look at the entire supply chain, how the cars are being charged. Okay, you have an electric car, but you end up charging it with your petrol, diesel, or gas. It doesn't give you a net solution, On the car you may reduce, but overall on electricity generation, your bills may go up. So in Toyota, both Toyota and Lexus, we are looking at this with a multi-mode approach, wherein we want to have our offer, both the ICE engines, you have the ICE engines which will exist, along with that we have the plug-in hybrids, we have the pure hybrid vehicle, which Prius was the pioneer, and we also have fuel cell cars, which don't emit anything except your water. And if you had been following us, if you had seen the last Davos summit where Dr. Gill, who's our chief scientist for Toyota Motor Corporation, and also the CEO for the Toyota Research, he in a very simple empirical formula, he explained that we also need to look at when you are doing electrifying, when you are doing the electrification, one of the key elements which you need is the lithium. And if you look at the demand and supply game for lithium, the way the current electrification is going, maybe by 2030, 40, they're looking at 40 to 50% gap in the supply. And when you look at the lithium mines, it takes almost 10 to 15 years to stabilize. So there is going to be a huge pressure on getting these raw materials or getting these rare elements. So the kind of formula which he came out was the amount of the battery elements like lithium that you need to make one battery electric vehicle that can actually power close to 6 plug-in hybrids. And if you don't want plug-in hybrids, it can in a way give you 90 hybrid cars. So the amount of carbon emission which you save on one electric car, but when you're doing it on 90, it is much, much higher. So we are looking at a multi-mode solution. We have petrol vehicles, the hybrid vehicles, ICE vehicles. And yes, of course, we do have electric plans also. We are not going to be left behind. We have the BZ4X and we have the UX, which has been undergoing a lot of rigorous tests, not only in Qatar, across Middle East for last 1.5 years. We would be coming soon, but yes, the timelines are a bit difficult for us to give. But our solution, as I said, is going to be a multi-mode approach, wherein depending on the customer, he can come and choose the kind of vehicle which he needs. So that is how Toyota and Lexus, both as a brand, is planning to support not only electrification, but we are looking at the overall carbon neutrality as the overall solution.
Sorry, I'd just like to add, I mean, what's interesting, and I'm not going to talk about, or I'm not going to take Sujith's space and talk about Toyota, but the two interesting, or one interesting thing, that the two last big manufacturers to come into the EV were Toyota and Hyundai. These two companies had taken a very different decision and invested in hydrogen, which exactly fuel cells, and that's where a lot of investment went in, and they didn't put that bet on electric vehicles. That bet came much more recently. Now, what's interesting is that we're talking about electric vehicles, and in reality, under electric vehicles, there's a lot of let's say, subdivisions, and it's really. What's exciting is that you're at the beginning of that evolution. I'm not going to call it a revolution, but let's call it an evolution. You know, it's just like back in the 80s when, you know, there was the Betamax and the VHS, and it was the question, same technology, different formats, what is better? DVD and Laserdisc, et cetera, plasma or OLEDs. And what's interesting is that today in the electric, you have a lot of sub-technologies that are, you know, so you have they're talking about solid-state batteries, they're talking about, so you have the normal BEVs, and then you have the hydrogen electric, so the PHEVs. So there are a lot of different technologies that are being worked on, and the big question is, which one is the most advantageous or the most adequate for the future? I think that the answer is still out there. I mean, no one knows what is the right answer. I think that it shouldn't be a break for people to actually adopt electric because, well, first of all, I think that with all these technologies, the real winner is the consumer, definitely not the manufacturers, because the manufacturers need to actually do the research and look into it. But so on the short term, I think it is the consumer who has the luxury of choice, and we have the luxury of deciding what is the right technology. And that's why I think this is one of the most exciting times. The automotive sector hasn't gone through such a fundamental change since probably the creation of the automobile.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
This will lead me to another question, because you deal already with different nationalities and the brands. Americans, Koreans, and Chinese. Who do you think is like more aggressive when it comes to EV, and who's more advanced in your opinion, in their approach?
You're putting me in a very, very sensitive. If any one of them sees, I'm going to get a call tomorrow complaining about whatever answer I'm going to give there. Look, I think it's way too early to say. There's definitely, I mean, and that there is no question about it, a real advancement. Although the Americans have started that technology and have pushed it, you know, at the beginning with obviously Tesla being the first one, but then a lot of other American brands have come up, Rivian, Lucid, and many others have come up. But the real leap in terms of pricing, in terms of pushing the change, has come really lately from China. China has invested a lot of money in electric, and today you can clearly see that they are a clear leader in the technology, and a lot of companies, a lot of countries are playing catch up with China, but the jury is still out. I don't think that there is a clear winner. You cannot say that's it, China is the winner and forget about it. I think the Koreans have been investing. They're being very, very, very aggressive. The Americans are not going to stay idle. They're investing, and they're trying to really push, especially since, I don't want to enter the politics, but since the whole Trump Make America Great Again, there's a lot of investment that has been put to develop the US technology in the US and to regain that supremacy that they've historically had. So today, I would say China is definitely at the forefront, but everything can change and very rapidly.
Just to continue to what Mr. Mohamed said, China, okay, obviously they have the advantage. They had the first step advantage, But at the end of the day, world is becoming small. It is becoming one world. So when a customer comes to the showroom, he's not looking at whether it is X, Y, Z. These are basically like the different colors of the passport. So what customer looks at is what's the quality. What's the quality? What is your offering? And now we have reached a stage wherein almost all the brands have maintained a similar quality level. Okay, but then it shifts into what is the customer experience. And additionally, one more point you need to understand is that now you don't have a certain brand, brand coming from Japan, brand coming from US. They are not restricted only to that place. Their production base is global. Maybe you are a Japanese brand, but we get the vehicle from Japan, we have from India, we have from Taiwan, we have something coming from US. So it is not only the country of origin, it is the quality that is going to matter. So whether it is X, Y, Z, because 10, 15 years back, it was not Chinese. We used to say Koreans are coming, Koreans are coming. Now it has become Chinese. So maybe tomorrow there's going to be a different geography that is going to come up. But at the end of the day, it's a quality, what you can offer. And second thing, in Middle East, what becomes more important is that if you look at the Middle East structure, unlike a non-Middle East structure wherein the principal himself controls the distributorship, Middle East is one place where we still have a lot of private players. We have the Toyota, which is controlled by Abdulghani Motors. We have Mr. Mohamed on the Jaidah side. So every brand has let a private family take care of it. And how strong these distributors are, that is also going to decide that. So the quality of the brand, how strong the brand is, how ethical the brand is, and how strong the distributor is, that is going to decide whether XYZ, a new brand coming in, is going to be successful or not. And as Mr. Mohamed said, it's at the end of the day, the jury, it's the customer. It's he who's going to decide whether I go left or right or I go the center path.
Yeah, I think, look, China has a great advantage over others, for sure. And I think it's their closed market, domestic market. In China, about 20 million vehicles are sold every year, right? In North America, you get down to, on a good year, maybe 13 million, and it goes down to 9 million. So I think they're very nationalistic, right? So I think for vehicles so they can survive on their own domestic market. They really don't need to export. Now they're beginning to export. In the last 5-6 years in Middle East, you're seeing a lot of Chinese brands popping in the countries, and I think it's good. Competition is always good, right? We live in a capitalist society. So definitely in US, that's how it happened. When you have major players, 3 or 4, competing against each other, the consumer will always be the winner. So I think from that point of view, one thing that they do very well in China is really produce in volumes, and those volumes then translate into a lower price for the consumer. And they have actually, just like Mohamed, Mr. Mohamed, and we're discussing, they have raised their quality. And 5-6 years ago, it was very hard to see them at par with even the Koreans. And now the Beijing Auto Show, I saw some reports from it. It's amazing what they have done. So I think it is, but it's good for for industry-wide. It's a very good thing, because I think that will bring the supplier costs down, hopefully. Currently, in electric vehicles, definitely the North Americans. It doesn't matter which segment you pick, they are the leaders in technology and powertrain that is coming out in the cars, but the Chinese are definitely picking up. And then the traditional OEMs like BMW, Mercedes, they're Audi, they're also catching up very fast. So, we have to keep innovating, and we need to keep bringing the price down so that the consumer feels very comfortable. They get a whole suite of, offerings And yes, they will pick the best car that is on price point, on the features, and also the customer experience as we discussed.
What kind of incentives do you think in the region needs so we can see lower prices?
Well, I think the incentives are really needed because the cost is high, right? So you need to, as the cost comes down, as I was talking about efficiency, I think all OEMs need to start thinking about efficiency. Because as we were discussing, lithium, you're going to go to nickel, then cobalt, and magnesium, and you're going to have the same issue. If the world starts selling 50% of electric vehicles, or even fuel cell vehicles, which will still require batteries, you will have the same issue. So I think efficiency is the way to do. Minimize the batteries, get the range to a comfort level, have the infrastructure at home, and at between cities, so that the consumer doesn't think that they need. Right now, there's a lot of wastage in electric vehicles. You have these ranges that, as Mr. Mohamed was also saying, 200 kilometers, but you charge your car for 800 kilometers, just because you want that comfort in your brain that, oh, I have range, right? So it's a waste of material, resources, price point that is being put into the car, and that's just to counter attack the consumer who thinks that the range is only 300 kilometers, 400 kilometers. Therefore, I need to go to a showroom that has the highest range. So I think Lucid had to do it because we wanted to show our leadership role, but I think in the future we will also start to scale back, and I think you will see that all other OEMs will do that. Incentives will be required until that happens. The customer awareness, the infrastructure is in place, those two things. Incentives will be required. In Saudi, we were able to get incentives for manufacturing, but the consumer-based incentives like Norway, the European countries, US, I think is still needed for the next 3-4 years, I would say.
Look, I mean, globally, there are 60 million vehicles sold a year. There are 6 million that are electric or hybrid. So that's 10% of the global market is EV or hybrid, which is starting to become a significant part. So I don't think that EV is, EV is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. As Faisal just said, right now the issue is the cost, right? Like the cost is quite substantial, especially when you compare it to traditional ICE vehicles. And it becomes even more complicated at a resale value, because at the end of the day, you don't buy a car and then throw it in the bin. You buy a car, you expect to sell it again in 5 years, 10 years. And this is the biggest question. EVs are still too recent, too new, to really understand the resale value of these cars. And there are a lot
the depreciation is high, I believe.
I'm sorry?
The depreciation is high on
right now,
vehicles.
the depreciation is high, especially in Qatar or in the Middle East. But from a global perspective, it's very difficult to have an assessment of what is the right resale value. Because there's also another question, the durability of these batteries, the ease of change of these batteries, right? Because even if today one of the major issues is that if your battery breaks and you need to change the battery, it costs you nearly as much as a new car. But in 5 years, 7 years, is that going to be the case or not? So there's a bet that you're taking, which no one has the answer. So you have these challenges. With an ICE vehicle, is much easier to know or predict the cost of ownership. On an electric vehicle, the short-term cost of ownership is quite easy. There's actually less parts, so your everyday consumption, parts consumption, is actually lesser. Electricity is cheaper than gas, therefore it's cheaper. So on the short term, as a matter of fact, an electric car is actually cheaper. Longer term, that's the question. As you said, right now, you sell, you buy an electric car in Qatar, you try to sell it 6 months from now, you don't come out with a positive experience from that. You lose a lot of money. So to answer your question, though, one of the major it's price sensitivity, and so comes the question: how do you, from a governmental aspect, how do you actually manage to support or to help in order to actually bridge that gap, in order to actually make these cars much more financially interesting to people, to say, you know what, I'm willing to give it a chance, and I'm willing to do that jump from ICE to electric. So I do not have a 100% proper answer to say this is what needs to be done, because I guess it's also, I mean, there are a lot of things that come into place. How does the government do that financial support? How do you push for that? It's not as straightforward. In Europe, in the US, you know, it's tax breaks. We don't have taxes here. So how do you play with that? These are the questions that I know at a government level is being talked about, not only locally, on a regional basis. The whole region is trying to align on these things, and we're all hoping and understanding that these decisions are going to be coming out quite soon, and we'll see some decisions at a regional level being taken. And I believe that's also why we're seeing more and more electric manufacturers opening up shop in the region, because they believe that it is coming.
Amazing. My last question to Mr. Sujith. What do you think the role of the local dealers in increasing the awareness and making the potential EV customer more relaxed and educated?
We had a similar problem when we brought the Prius a few years back, wherein a lot of people were quite doubtful about how the vehicle will work, what will happen to the batteries. So that is when we had a lot of education programs, and now of late the awareness with the people is there. And even our hybrid cars go with almost, especially the battery, goes with a 8-year warranty or 160,000 kilometers warranty. So people are aware, people don't have any kind of hindrance, and when a person comes to the showroom, you know, like he doesn't differentiate the vehicle. At the end of the day, he is looking at a mobility solution. Okay, they don't come with a mindset that, okay, he wants a petrol, he wants a hybrid, he wants an electric. He basically wants a mobility solution to move from one place to other. And this mobility solution could be in any of the powertrains. But as Mr. Mohamed rightly pointed out, at present there is a big gap. Like we find a gap between our ICE engines and hybrid engines because the cost is higher, it comes with the battery. But if you look at the other markets where electrification has been successful or hybrid cars are very, very successful, it is exactly being driven by the financial support. You know? So there's a lot of support that comes to the consumer. So the consumer is not going to the showroom saying that, no, I want to buy a hybrid car, so I'll definitely, or I want to buy an electric car. No. He goes, picks up this car mainly because there's a lot of incentives that is coming to him. That is one of the key things that is driving, you know. So as a distributor, what we can do is that we can give the touch and feel of how this vehicle will work. We can keep the consumer aware. We can remove all sorts of doubts from his mind, you know, whether the electric cars are safe or not. Yes, they are totally safe. Vehicles are being tested for so many years, you know, and else you will not have someone like Lucid coming and setting up a factory, because having an electric car in Middle East does give a lot of doubts in the mind of the people because of the temperature, you know, and it is a battery. It is quite inflammable one. So that is one of the biggest doubt which people have. So that side, yes, that we as a distributor, as a manufacturer, yes, we can remove those doubts, we can make the people aware, we can show them the test drive, we can, like, even out our own electric vehicles are being tested here for last 1.5 years. The same thing has been done by many people. But yes, the financial support coming in also would be something that will drive these consumers to shift or to be along in both the modes.
I would like to just add, I think, the consumer really needs to feel comfortable, and I agree with that. And I think the OEMs have to start playing a little bit of a role too, right? Because we have sustainable goals of our own. So every major company in the world now is, working towards SDGs, the United Nations SDGs. So, there is a little bit of a price to pay. For Lucid, we know that electric vehicles in the beginning are not going to make us as much profit if we were in a business of ICE, because, we have basically reduced the price of our vehicle significantly. When we started in Saudi with our first offerings, it was 365,000 reals. Now it's 299. So we are playing our part. We're bringing the price down for our most luxurious vehicle, 3 years in a row in production now, beating Mercedes, BMWs. Not just electric vehicle, complete luxury vehicle offering. 299 is a very attractive price, but for again, for a luxury car. But I think we have to play and then we also raise the warranty. So 8 years of warranty on the no questions asked on battery, on powertrain, because these are the consumer comes and gives us that feedback. I'm super worried about the battery. If something happens to it, $30,000, $20,000 out of my pocket minimum, so okay, you're 8 years complete, installation, replacement. It's our headache. You get a replacement car if we, keep the car. So these type of things, I think OEMs will have to start playing. And then on the residual value, I would like to completely agree with that, because I think there's not enough data points. And us lowering the price down, actually, it really hurts the residual value. And Tesla and us and others, in order to get more vehicles out, and the competition wars that are happening in North America and Europe are bringing, the OEMs are bringing the price of the electric vehicles down, and actually hurts us in a long term as an industry, because consumer walks out and pays a price, and 6 months later the price of the vehicle is 20% less in case of Tesla. All of a sudden that customer has no option to keep the car. Now they have to keep the car for a couple of years. Otherwise, if they go back and try to sell it, a new car is being sold at a cheaper price. So, it's a chicken versus egg, because we're trying to do the right thing for the consumers, but I think it's way too aggressive, and it needs to slow down the price cutting. Otherwise, the residual values will just keep hurting.
Look, it's interesting. I mean, charging batteries is part of our lives, and it's been part of our lives for at least 20, 30 years. I mean, we charge phones, we charge laptops, we charge so many different devices. But when it comes to the car, we freeze. We're like, oh, wait, I'm not sure I'm ready to charge my car. A lot of reasons. The car battery is bigger, therefore it takes more time. As Faisal said, what if the battery breaks? I'm ready to change my phone or my laptop. It's not the same cost as changing a car. But the reality is that psychology, the role of dealerships, going back to the question, is the fact that the role of dealerships is to actually fight that fear and the psychological block that people have. And comes the fact that it's the chicken or the egg first. Do you need to have the full infrastructure ready for people to be able to move, or do you need the people to actually move in and then the infrastructure comes along? Again, I go back to the fact, and this is where dealerships, because it becomes a localization, and again, Qatar is a perfect market. This is the market where you can drive your car on a daily basis. You don't need to be worried about finding your charging stations. You can charge at a friend's house. You can charge when you go back home. It's at the end of the day, it's an electric plug that you need to be able to to get to. And I think, again, it's a mentality. It's how used are you to actually do these things. And I think this is where also, from a governmental perspective, I think the government has started, the Ministry of Transport specifically has started to do a great job in Qatar. You know, public transportation has been moving more and more to the, you know, most of all the new buses since 2022 have been electric for transportation. Yesterday, His Excellency announced a partnership with the Ministry of Education. School buses are going to be electric. So when people start getting used to the concept of electrification, that's a easier sell to them. But again, there's also, and I want to go back to one point that Sujith had done earlier, which was the importance of, you know, in the Middle East, each brand has a dealership. Unlike other places in the world, NIO, for example, decided to go, you know, direct to consumer in Europe. Here in the Middle East is a much more different. You still have the dealership concept, and dealerships do play a big role in supporting the vehicle, supporting the brand, pushing the product, and raising the awareness. These are markets so the name of the dealership, the experience of the dealership does play a big role in supporting the distribution or the push of the electric on in the market.
Well, gentlemen, I would really like to continue this discussion, but unfortunately our time doesn't allow us. I will open the floor to the questions if anyone has any question.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panelists for this very interesting discussion to you. Now, one point I would like to highlight here when it comes to the consumers' attitudes towards buying a car, for instance, whether it's ICE or EV. I, as a local guy, if I decide to buy an American truck, for instance, go to Jaidah or Manai or wherever, I would look at how the car looks like, the accessories, how luxury is it, okay? This is, you know, a prime concern to local consumers than what's built inside the engine, how the engine operates, how much the car does for a gallon of gas or petrol, whatever. Okay, so I think the same principles also applies to EVs. Okay, the other day I went to Hyundai and Genesis. It's the same showroom, and shall I get a Genesis or a Hyundai? So I started looking how the cars look like, to be honest. Okay, I probably didn't bother much about how many kilometers I could do with a full charge. Okay, so that's the main, general attitude, let me say, about the consumers here locally. My question is, how can we possibly bridge the gap between the manufacturers of AVs in order to standardize the main parts and elements of AV vehicles? Is there a chance that we could do that? So rather than having different batteries produced by different manufacturers, is there a way we can standardize at least the batteries? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think completely agree with you. I think the first thing, at least we are producing a luxury car, so the first attractive feature that we have is the car is beautiful, and that's what attracts a person to it. But on the battery side, I don't think there will be any standardization, and I think the reason is that you have different supply base that is actually supplying. It's very similar to that you didn't had really the energy producer, the engine standardized. Everyone wants to have different specs. Everyone has their own intellectual property. Like Lucid was actually a battery provider first. We started in 2012, and we provided batteries. We were selling battery packs to all the OEMs, Porsche, General Motors, Mercedes, Audis, for their racing, electric racing circuits, They relied on us. So in the racing circuit, standard batteries is a concept, because every car has to have the same battery so that they're competing on the same level. But on the consumer side, even in commercial vehicles, it hasn't really caught up. If it's going to happen, it will probably happen in the commercial vehicles first, because nobody's really, competing on range that much. But unfortunately, even till now, as I was saying before, a lot of, it's like brownie points. Everybody wants to raise their, thing. Tesla used to say that we have the longest range, but now Lucid says that, first 6 vehicles in the world are Lucid variants for the longest range, and then Tesla. So we go and we advertise ourselves like that, right? So it becomes like a thing. So I don't see a standard battery packs coming out for all OEMs in the near future.
What Mohamed thinks?
No, but, I think that before seeing any batteries being commonly used, I mean, you're going to have it to a certain extent, because smaller players, I mean, more niche manufacturers don't have the capacity to actually put the R&D. They're going to be buying from other bigger producers. But at the end of the day, it's just like an engine, right? Like, you are interested in knowing the horsepower. You're interested in knowing, but you don't care if it's manufactured by the manufacturer or if he's bought it somewhere else. But what's important is that you know that you can put the same gas, you can go to any gas station and put the same gas. And I think that that's what's going to happen. Today, more and more manufacturers are agreeing on the charge parts. Therefore, as long as you're going to be able to charge with the same charger, and you don't have to wonder, do I have the right charger? This is not the right charger. It's fine, right? So, in all these technologies, whether it's solid state, whether it's sodium batteries, hydrogen batteries, normal batteries, at the end of the day, they all charge the same way. It's just the technology behind, and then so I don't think that everyone is going to continue investing in a way or another and having different technologies. But as long as they all agree that this is the charger and this is a universal charger, the consumer is not going to really feel it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the interesting discussion. Do the panelists think that a vehicle ownership model needs to change? Traditionally, you'll have vehicle manufacturing and then after-sale support and so on. We have started to see lease contracts from some manufacturers, but we see reluctance across, maybe all OEMs to introduce this. As a consumer, I wouldn't have to worry, for example, about the value depreciation or having, to bear the cost of replacing the battery and so on. Do you think the ownership model needs to change? For me, I don't care whether the vehicle runs on watermelon or something else, as long as I don't have to worry about the cost of depreciation and replacing the battery. Thank you.
So, this depends on how mature your market gets, Like something like this is happening in the commercial vehicle front. If you go for buses or trucks in some of the matured markets, Asian markets, and even US markets, So whenever the vehicles are sold, they are sold along with the battery packs. So consumer need not worry about that. So that kind of business model will really depend on how the penetration increases. Like even if you look at us, we have been selling hybrids for quite some time in Qatar market, but we have not reached a very big level. So even consumers are still not that much penetration of hybrids compared to what the ICE engines have. So any change in business model, unlike which exists now, will totally depend on how many customers starts buying it, how many vehicles, how many UI of vehicles come on the road. That would decide a change in the business model.
Yeah, I'll just add, the ownership model, I think, depending on which segment you're in, I think it also differentiates. And also, you have to think from a regional perspective, as Mohamed was saying, in this region, I think it is going to be very hard to go to a leasing, subscription type of a model, because people have that association, with the vehicle. They want to park it in there. They're very proud to own that vehicle. They want to go to their friends or majlis and, present their vehicle. It's very hard to do those type of things if you say, well, I've got this vehicle for 2 days, and then I'm going to return it. So I think it's going to catch up here in a very small segment, and it's going to be a cars of certain types, maybe entry-level cars or something that is used for different purposes, or commercial vehicle, as it's that. In Europe, I think subscription models are going to pick up much faster because the way the economics work in that region. In US, it's very similar type of a behavior here. Also, people like to own their vehicles, have big houses, park their cars, be proud of their cars, get it out on the weekend. And same thing by the way, on autonomous. It's when people ask me about autonomous, I think there is going to be certain segments that are going to go autonomous. But I love to drive my car. I would want to have that. I saw a vehicle yesterday in Abu Dhabi. I was at another conference, and it was a Chinese commercial truck with no windows in the front, and it was fully autonomous. And it looked very weird. So on the logistics side, maybe it can work, but a consumer would always want a steering wheel. They will always want a seat to sit. You can switch it to autonomous when you are really tired, but you would want to drive your car because you feel proud to have that car ownership.
I think, look, the question is very valid. The question, I thank you for it, because it does bring up other points that we actually haven't covered during this panel. A lot of car manufacturers now are actually studying how to decide on what options they activate for you. So, like for example, you wouldn't have the heater. The heater option is in the car, but it wouldn't function unless you pay a subscription, right? So during winter, you'd pay for heater, and therefore you can use the heater, but then spring comes in and you just stop paying the subscription. You don't have the heater functioning. So car manufacturers are trying to find ways of bringing the cost of ownership down, but also making it this whole subscription model has been trying. The auto industry has been toying around with it for the past few years. Volvo famously launched in the US a subscription model, which everyone praised at the beginning, and then it's a leasing model. Really, it doesn't. But as Faisal said, this region, people have an emotional attachment to their cars. That if you tell them you're not going to own your car, there's a kind of a pride issue here. Probably it can work. I'm not saying it won't work, because you're also in a region where there's a lot of passage. You have a lot of people visiting for a short term or a longer term. You have people who are coming in here saying, expats coming, staying 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and leaving. Do they really want to own a car? They don't want to own a car. They just want to be able to go to work and come back. Are these people going to be interested in a subscription model? Most probably they will, but then it's a different segment. We're talking, these people anyways don't want to put a lot of money in their cars, so they want to make sure that they're getting the cheaper, not only the base model, but also they'll always look at what's the most economically friendly option. So if an ICE product is still more economically friendly, they'll still go with the economically friendly on that premise. So should it exist? It should. Will it exist? It will. But I think it's not as straightforward as saying if that exists, it's going to immediately shoot the sales or shoot the number of electric cars on the road immediately.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for this interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.